Welcome into got a little excited there. Welcome into another episode of 11 Personnel. Adam Luckett here. Nick Roush is not here. Nick Roush is somewhere in St. Pete, I believe. Check it. Visiting his brother, probably deleting some cold beers by a body of water, and then I'll get to meet up with him here. I guess at the end of the week, or maybe the beginning of the week, we'll get to meet up with him. We're a week long in Tampa. That's right. SEC Media Days is here, and we're going to talk about it. 11 Personnel is presented, as always, by our good friends at Monticello Bank. Enjoy the home court advantage with Monticello Bank's HELOC special and use the equity you've built in your home to finance special home projects and improvements. Score big with fantastic introductory rate and attractive closing costs with 21 locations in 15 counties across Kentucky. We're just around the corner. So hurry in and speak with one of our mortgage lenders about this limited time offer today. Find us on the web at mbcbank.com, Monticello Bank, where people matter. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Really excited here next month. We're going to get out to Monticello Bank as we always do. Probably have one of our season preview episodes out there with the good people at Monticello Bank, and excited to visit with them, see what they've got going on out there. Monticello Bank been riding with 11 Personnel a long time. Excited to have them locked and loaded with us again as we enter another football season. And to me, a big part of like knowing that, all right, it's kind of the season now. It's media days. ACC's going on right now in Charlotte. James Franklin's talking about how he's won the offseason. Now they got to actually go and play games. And then next week, the big kahuna, right? SEC takes center stage down in Tampa. Greg Sankey starts us off Monday. But on Monday afternoon, we'll hear Will Stein. Now, going to this Vince, I kind of knew what to expect, with Mark Stoops, because he had done them for so long. He kind of knew what he was going to talk about, what he was going to sell, kind of what the major talking points would be for Stoops. We don't really know that yet for Stein. So that's kind of going to be our episode today. Adam Luckett's running solo. We've done this before when Roush has been on vacation. Seemed like the last couple times we've done it, people really enjoyed it. So we're rolling solo today, and we're just going to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive here on this beautiful July 16th. Here in the Bluegrass. We're going to do a deep dive. We're going to kind of talk about, or at least I'm going to talk about what I believe Will Stein will address and what the talking points are. And then we're going to kind of go through the roster and talk about some players that I believe are going to be brought up this week. So that's what we're going to do. Every media days, they give what I term is, the state of the program. State of the program is what you see at these media events. They all have these big podiums, right? Where it's where the part they show you on TV. It's the big podiums for 15, 20 minutes, and they ask questions. And before those questions, these head coaches will kind of give the lay of the land, the state of affairs for their football organizations. So talk about the offseason, talk about last season, talk about what's ahead, maybe talk about some players, yada, yada, before they answer questions. Now, there has been times in the past where Hugh Freeze was at Ole Miss, and he didn't really want to take questions, so he filibustered for, I believe, SEC, there's a 20-minute allotment. So I don't think we'll see that. Now, there's some coaches, Brian Harsin, that one I was at in the past, I think he went on for 17 minutes. Ed Orgeron, when he was at Oregon, would kind of go through his entire roster. I want to say Sam Pittman did that one year. So you do see some of that. I don't think Stein will necessarily do that. But he's been on the job for 8 months. And so we kind of got an idea of what he's going to talk about. So I kind of went back this week and just kind of did some research about what some big talking points for Stein will be. And we're going to use this episode of 11 Personnel as kind of a refresher here for the Big Blue Nation, to kind of go over some of his big focus areas, let's say, that he's discussed while on the job, while in front of a microphone, while trying to sell the program. And that's really what media days is in a lot of ways. It's everybody's 0-0. No one's won or lost a game. Everyone feels good about their running back room, or feels good about just how their team is attacking the offseason, right? So we're going to talk about some of that. We're also going to go in depth too. We're going to go in depth a little bit on the roster. I see the chat pretty pumped up about the Ponatoski news. as you should be, right? We'll get into that a little bit when we kind of talk about the quarterback room. And so we're going to talk about that all today on 11 Personnel. We're just going to go down and, again, format basically what I think the talking points will be here when Stein's in Tampa, when he's on the big stage, when he goes on Feinbaum, when he talks with some of the national media, and when he talks with us, the local media, which will be some point in the afternoon there in Tampa. Sounds like he's going to be one of the last guys that goes, Stein is, on that Monday, which it'll start off with Greg Sankey's big kind of state of the league, state of affairs, which is a lot of the boring stuff I think people would classify, but we're going to hear kind of what are the conferences, and that's important too. We're going to cover that all down in Tampa. As always, 11 Personnel will be there. We get there Sunday. We're heading out Thursday, so we're going to miss most of Thursday, but you're going to have daily podcasts from us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from down in Tampa, just talking about what we're seeing at KS Board. Right now, I'm rolling out SEC Media Days content. Order of finish. My ballot just went live at KSR Plus today. Go see where I projected all the teams to finish. Now, when I do this, I predict wins and losses for all these games. So this is not just me pulling it out of my rear, right? So I have actually numbers, and at the bottom of the column, I have how it breaks down record-wise. I've got Kentucky above the bottom, really. A few spots between them and the bottom. And projected them to get back to a bowl game, and then just where I see the league. And then coming out tomorrow, I'll have preseason teams, offense, defense. So we're pumping out content. We're going to have plus content. We'll have jam-packed site, KSR Main, KentuckySportsRadio.com will be loaded down, and then we'll be podcasting. We'll be talking to some of our friends in the media, some of the national media. I'm sure we'll have our normal hits with SEC Mike and Cousin Shane, along with a lot of other stuff. Just kind of get what is the view of Kentucky, what is the view of Will Stein, and what is the view of, well, what's the buzz, really? How's everyone feeling going in this year? I think you're going to hear a lot about Texas spending a lot of money. How does Vanderbilt replace Diego Pavia? I think is kind of an interesting storyline here. John Summerall at Florida is going to be interesting. A lot of Kentucky connections there. So we're going to get all of that when we're in Tampa. Make sure you're following along. All of that, all those will be found here, right here on the KSR YouTube channel. If you hadn't hit subscribe, do that right now. But that's enough of kind of our introduction here on today's episode of 11 Personnel. We're going to dive in to just what I think will be some big talking points for Will Stein when he's at the podium again. First one, not a surprise, Will Stein's fanhood, right? I think you're going to hear a lot about Section 128. It's been easy for me to remember Will Stein's section because I grew up going to games in Section 126, row 31, seats 7 through 10. Like, I haven't memorized Stein's row and section, but that just, it pops in my head every time I hear that being brought up. So I think you'll hear about, how he grew up going to games. And obviously that's a separator for him from the Louisville situation when he played at Louisville, coached at Louisville, all of that. But I think you're going to hear about that, how his dad played here, how he grew up going to games, how it really, that called him to, or was part of the reason why he took this job. So I think you'll, again, expect to hear a lot of talk about his fanhood. We've talked about this, and it's been covered extensively here as we've kind of followed Stein on the job. Both you sitting here watching it, and both us in the media, just kind of followed it and how he sold it and how he knows Kentucky can have success. Like, he's got pictures with Steve Zahn the other day on social media. Then obviously, like, we've seen him post pictures. He's golfing with Tim Couch out of Jay Get Tammy's Scramble fundraiser. He's hanging out with, showing pictures of Wesley Woodyard and Jared Lorenzen. He had the Jared Lorenzen jersey on, right, during the official visits, the retro number 22 jersey on. So I think he's going to talk about all that growing up, watching Kentucky, going to games. And then that's going to get him into, I think, selling his vision. So I expect more fanhood talk, right? Expanding upon his vision is, I think, going to be a big part of kind of Will Stein's talking points, as it is for any and every coach, specifically the first-year coaches. Just what is your vision? And I think this is a good time to get us back into a quote that he said at his introductory press conference that I think will be maybe expanded upon or maybe dove into a little bit in Tampa. Now, I think it's important to remember we're in the transfer portal era. There's no such thing as year zero, right? Remember the year zero was like, well, like, you got to give them a year to kind of get their bearings, flip the roster, establish protocols, establish a way, a program standard, a way to do things. There's none of that anymore because rosters can flip so much, and because of the money, and because of the portal tool you have where you can get players in here fast. So no, like, should you expect the best team Will Stein maybe ever will field at Kentucky year one? No, that's crazy, right? There obviously has to be a little bit of a buildup for anyone, but you need to see real proof of concept like in year one. And I think you're going to hear him talk about that. And I think, I found this quote interesting during his introductory press conference, and I think we could see something similar to it again. It was, the vision's really simple. It's to win. I didn't come here to be average. I didn't come here to be mediocre. I came here to win and win championships. I've won at every single level that I've been at, high school, college, and now the goal is to win here. And not win 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, to do it now. So I think that's something we're going to hear a version of, right, while we're at SEC Media Days. There's a version, and even at Kentucky's Media Day that will occur in August. And even as we get through this season and into the year two and all of that stuff, I think we're going to hear a version of Will Stein's vision, which is the expectation is to win, and it's to win right now. We've built this team to win now, and that's what we're going to try to do. There's no, slow steps into this. You're diving in head first. You're trying to win. You're going into this conference, and you're ready to take your swings against some of the best in the country. And we feel that we've got a plan, we've got a roster, and we've got all of this that's going to allow us to win games. And I think you'll hear him expand on that vision. And then I think, obviously, feed the studs will come up. I think this will be something that more like national people or people that aren't day-to-day expand on the feed the studs mentality. And I think we'll hear more about that. Coach Kublik had an interview with Stein this week. I would highly recommend going listen. It's up on KSR. He kind of goes more in depth of a little bit of X's and O's and what they're trying to do schematically, simple, basically you want to, load up the presentation, but we're running the base set of plays, like ground game, run a duo, run a counter, run an inside zone, run an outside zone. Passing game, he goes through the 3 or 4 or 5 concepts he really likes, and then dressing them up and making it as simple as possible. Wants his quarterbacks to chase completions, and then wants to get the ball to his playmakers. We've heard feed the studs. He kind of opened up on who could maybe be some studs where they're spitting the football out to in quick game. DJ Miller came up in that conversation. We've talked about Miller's kind of a sleeper. He might be the guy that they look to force feed. Obviously, Willie Rodriguez, who we're going to get to in a minute, will be one of those. So feeding the studs, him kind of expanding on that. That's something he's got from Bobby Petrino. I think you'll hear him expand on that. And that's going to be a core tenet, a core philosophy for Kentucky football, specifically on offense. I think it'll come up. Will Stein's not calling plays. Joe Sloan's going to be calling plays, but even Joe Sloan has said that we're running the Will Stein offense here. And I think the feed the studs will kind of lead to introducing the staff. I think offensively, what's very interesting here is obviously Stein, the play caller. It's part of the reason he's here. Probably the major reason is his success he's had as a play caller in his coaching career. So obviously, he's kind of the head of the snake there, right? But there's also an interesting room they built. Obviously, Sloan coming over from LSU, offensive coordinator, was quarterbacks coach before that at LSU, SEC experience, legit recruiting chops. I think we're seeing kind of play out on the recruiting trail. Him kind of being the lead guy on Jake Narot and the Kenny Minchie, how they built their relationship with Kenny Minchie. A lot of it was, Sloan had a relationship with Mike Denbrock. He worked with Mike Denbrock, Notre Dame's offensive coordinator. While they were at LSU, he was a QB coach when Denbrock was the offensive coordinator at LSU. So you're seeing that play out. But there's other guys involved too. Like Justin Burke called plays at UTSA. He's here. He's Kentucky's tight ends coach. He's going to be involved in kind of that offensive think tank. And then, Andrew Coverdale, who Stein played for at Trinity. Anyone who knows at Trinity, they talk about Andrew Coverdale like he is a football wizard. And so he's going to have a role, I think, in kind of the play calling or game planning and all of that. So I'll be interested to see if Stein opens up on that at all when those questions come. But he's definitely going to be asked about that, asked about his offense and that vision. Defensively, I think that's going to come up. He'll introduce the staff, Jay Bateman. Throughout the process when Jay Bateman was hired, Stein has brought up a lot what Texas A&M, what they're doing on third down. Up at KSR Plus this week, early scouting reports are rolling out, kind of giving deep dive previews of Kentucky's opponents, advanced stats, film cut-ups, personnel broken down, transfer portal class, state of those programs like we're doing here. A&M came up this week, and A&M, I think they're top 5 in havoc rate. They were number 1 third down defense. They were top 5 in success rate. So A&M was really good at winning the down-to-down fight. They would give up some explosives in the back end, but they win the down-to-down fight. And when it got to third down, turn up the heat, and we're great on third down and a great third down package. We've heard Stein mention that. I think you're going to hear some of that more when he kind of talks about Jay Bateman in the vision defensively of what he thinks Kentucky's going to be. It's going to be a new style ball on defense. We've talked about that a lot. I think you're going to hear them talk about just the aggressive nature of ball they're going to play. And then I think you're going to hear some stuff on the front office, right? Front office structure is here at Kentucky football. General Manager Pete Biondo, Assistant General Manager, Pete Nocta, Director of Player Personnel, Jarrett McElwain, and a few more guys in that personnel stuff really beefed up that. And I think you're going to hear a lot about the recruiting success. A lot of that will be in the front office. A lot of it came from what Stein did at Oregon. And you're going to see a lot of that, or hear a lot of that, I think, of the front office. So we know, I've talked about it. I think just organizationally in their plan and the execution of the plan, playing a volume game in recruiting, I think we've seen that play out. Stein's talked about how, money matters, and we're going to get to being resource here in a minute. But still, high school recruiting specifically, you still got to put in the work. You still got to put in the effort. Getting kids on campus, it's easier to get them probably to agree to a deal if you got them on campus a bunch of times, if they want to be there. And that's what Kentucky, I think, has done a really good job of, is just getting guys on campus, playing the volume game. You're not going to sign them all, but if you play the volume game, you get them on campus enough, you're going to eventually get them. And that's, I think, led to Kentucky having this class where they're pushing, where I think they've got a legit chance, if they close fast or hard, they've got a legit chance to get a top 20 signing class this year. And that would be a big deal. Being top 20 is not something I don't think they ever did in the Stoops era. I think they were between like 22 and 26. I haven't crushed the numbers on this to see if they ever got in the top 20 in average star rating. They might have in that Berrien Brown, Keontae Goodwin, Dane Key class. But they've got a chance to do that in year one, which would be, that you reach the high established in year one would be really impressive. And I think that front office staff and just the structure has a lot to do with that. They're attacking it the way I think you got to attack it in this new era. So they're doing a really good job. And I think you'll hear Stein talk about that. I think we'll hear a big question in Kentucky, specifically for people outside of here locally, is always the basketball thing. Like, do you feel your resource with having championship basketball aspirations? And then especially with the On3 valuation that just came out, Milan Momcilovic was in that top 10. I mean, I think he was top 4, 3, 2. He was up there. I think he was right behind Darian Mintz, the Miami quarterback. So, like, Kentucky's obviously spending a lot of money on basketball, as we all know. But people want to know, like, do you feel like your resource? And that was one of my first questions to Stein at the introductory press conference. Do you feel your resource? And of course, that was followed by one of Mitch Barnhart's final rants, right? Like the enough rant was when he gave after that, like saying we have enough here, yada, yada, yada. We don't have to relive that. Everyone knows what that was. But for Stein, he said he absolutely felt their resource. They have a plan. Now, in his recent Rotary speaking engagement, the Lexington Rotary Club, Stein opened up on, how he didn't think this new bill was going to be passed. We'll hear Sankey talk about that. And that he has to keep pushing pretty much because you got to roster prices are only going up. So you got to keep pushing for more resources and all that. So he's going to continue to do that. But I think right now, just what he's been given at Kentucky, he feels like they've got enough where they can go out and get the players they need to win. So he feels like he resourced. I'm almost certain you'll hear about the new weight room and what that will do and how they've already the administration has given them something to build up the program. So Yeah. So I think your vision, resources, introducing the staff, front office, feed the stud, Will Stein's fanhood is all something we'll all hear about. And then I think we'll get into the year, previewing the year. It's going to talk about the transfer portal class. Obviously, had a huge transfer portal class. Who it's headlined by. It's going to start with quarterback Kenny Minchey, obviously the Notre Dame transfer. Is going to be at SEC Media Days with Stein, along with Ty Bryant, along with the other returnee is escaping me. Why can't I remember the other person's name who's going to Willie Rodriguez, of course. Willie Rodriguez. So Minchey's going to be kind of the selling point. Again, I think you're going to hear the same things we've heard about Minchey to this point, right? Was committed to Nebraska. Kentucky pivoted to him after being involved in the Sam Levitt sweepstakes. He was pretty much going to Nebraska. Kentucky flips him. They liked everything they've heard about him. Now, obviously, Minchey has not played, but this guy was a blue chip recruit coming out. And by all accounts, that battle with CJ Carr went down to the wire last fall camp. CJ Carr, of course, is like, if you're looking at some odds, like he's at the top of the Heisman race. He could be QB1 in the 2027 NFL draft. So they've liked everything about Minchey, and I expect them to hear them talk about that, as well as talk about the rest of the portal haul. Obviously, Lance Hurd, the big Tennessee tackle transfer, which, by the way, Lance Hurd, they had a little video of him, Kentucky Twitter this week. Big Landman fan, so that obviously wins him some points in my book. Everyone's a Tommy Norris fan, even big Lance Hurd, Kentucky starting left tackle. Third SEC school for Lance Hurd now after stops at LSU and Tennessee. He's going to be a guy obviously Kentucky needs him to be one of the better players on the offense. I think they'll talk about his importance while we're in Tampa. And then there's going to be some other transfers, obviously, that come up. Colton Price is a big one. There at center, I think Colton Price is probably going to show up on some preseason all SEC teams. And then there's going to be some other transfers they talk about as well with guys like Elijah Bo Barnes, the linebacker. They're going to need to probably step into a starting position. Jordan Castell has played a lot of football at safety. Aaron Gates, another Florida transfer, along with Castell, is going to be a guy that they need to play a big role in that nickel position, which Bateman has talked about. It's one of the most important positions on his defense. Nick Anderson at wide receiver. Was a guy who looked like one of the better receivers in the country at Oklahoma in 2022 when he played for a quarterback named Dylan Gabriel, who would ultimately play for Stein, but he's been hurt ever since. It's been hard for him to get going. And then Tegra Shabola is a guy they're excited about at Ohio State that plays guard. And then I think you'll hear about C.J. Baxter, Javonte Barnes, these new running backs. Baxter's a guy with the Texas ties. Be interested to see if we kind of peel that back a little bit, learn more about him. Obviously, there was an injury in the spring, and he's had hamstring injuries in the past. He had that ligament injury, at Texas, and they pretty much took him out for the entire 2024 season, and didn't just look the same. But there's going to be a lot of transfer talk, about Kentucky's transfer class, and we're going to be talking about it because of just the volume. And I think people, specifically from a national lens, have been really intrigued by this class. The Minchey flip was pretty high profile, as we all know, in January, but just as high profile was Kentucky being in on Levitt, as serious as that was, until LSU really made a hard push. That was one of the surprises I felt like in January. We were like, Kentucky with Sam Levitt? Like what? Like some people were just like, really? What's going on? But I think that's going to be a big part of it. It's just the portal class. You're going to hear them talk a lot about the portal class and what they added, because that's a huge part of the football team, obviously. And then Ty Bryant and Willie Rodriguez will come into focus. They're, of course, going to be there. Willie, we've talked about it. They're going to throw the ball to the tight end at him. Luckett, are they going to throw the ball to tight end? How many catches is a tight end going to get? You're going to hear a lot about that. Willie's going to be a huge part. He's already called him an NFL tight end. Stein has, I believe, after the spring game. They've gushed about Rodriguez, really, from the jump. Everyone knows the success that some tight ends at Oregon had. Terrence Ferguson, who's with the Rams. Kenyon Sadiq was just a first-round pick. Jamari Johnson showing up on preseason All-American teams this year with the Ducks. So tight end's going to be a big part of it. Willie will get to hear about the offense and all that. And then, to me, Ty Bryant, it's very interesting here going into this media days. Ty Bryant's going to be there. Ty Bryant, to me, was kind of the spokesperson of the team, really, all last year. when things really weren't going bad, it felt like it was Ty Bryant who we were talking to about it and even selling it. So Ty Bryant even last year said he's just been a spokesperson for Kentucky football. Now he's seen both eras, with the end of the Stoops and now like where there's so much optimism to start the Stein era. So be really interested to just talk to him. And we are going to sit down and talk to Ty. Just what are the differences and how much has it changed and what to you makes you think like this is going to work? So Ty's going to be an interesting guy to talk to. He, of course, has played a lot of football. He's joining Jordan Castell in that safety room. That's probably the most experienced safety tandem in college football. I think Bryant's got a chance to show up on some preseason all SEC teams. So he's interesting as just like a holdover because, again, he was kind of a face of the program last year for Kentucky. Was a guy that talked to the media, us, a lot. And he's that hasn't changed at all from this transition. I think he was one of the more important players for them to retain. I think you'll hear them talk about the other players that are important to retain, most notably Tavian Gadsden, defensive tackle, Michael Humphrey Grace, defensive end. Both those guys going to show up. And if you're paying attention right now, Gadsden is showing up on some of these early draft boards. I believe Dane Brugler came out with his defensive tackle rankings over at The Athletic this week. I believe Gadsden was 4th or 5th defensive tackle. So this is a second and third round pick we're talking about for Kentucky at defensive tackle heading into the season. And Kentucky hasn't had these type of players at, like, I would say 3-tech defensive tackle, really. We had Deion Walker is obviously there, but there was obviously the size thing with Deion. So they've had it with Deion. I should take that back. But they haven't had it other than that. And so for Gadsden, it's going to be interesting. Like, he's got I think, potential splash player, impact performer. And what does Kentucky feel about him? Because that's a key position. You have a guy there. And then obviously Humphrey Grace, who I think is going to be a draft pick. So selling those two guys is something I think will come up. And then roster retention. It was important to retain some players on this roster, which they did that, obviously. And some players could step into bigger roles, like Malachi Wood, for example. Just where is he at right tackle? Obviously, tight end, Henry Boyer is a name that keeps popping up that seems like this Kentucky staff really likes. DJ Miller is a guy, obviously, we'll talk about a lot, I think, here in Tampa and throughout the month as we get closer to the season, the month of August. And then some other guys like a Grant Godfrey, I think, is an interesting one. Who played a little bit last year, is obviously gonna have a bigger role, I think, this year. So all of this will go down in Tampa. And then I think we'll hear Stein talk about just the retention of the roster, like I just said. And then the marketing of the program. I mean, he just went on Aaron Torres. He's been on all these podcasts. I'm going to try to ask Stein, why was it so important to sell your program? Because last year, let's face it, what was the storyline for Kentucky football going into last year, right? Chat knows, motivated Mark Stoops. It was motivated Mark Stoops. And, we get to Atlanta last year. Mark Stoops tries to display that. And basically what it turned into was Mark Stoops saying he was grateful, but mainly it was head in the sand. It was like, I don't want to say anything that's going to make a headline. We just want to be quiet and go to work and let the results speak for themselves. We know how that ended. This has been the opposite in the total 180 here. How Stein's been selling and marketing the program with, like, the stadium stuff, like announcing the game announcements. Like today, I was seeing, I know the Bengals did yesterday. They did the orange out for the opener, and then they were having a stripe out game versus the Chiefs. And then I think we saw the Commanders announce when they're going to wear, I believe, their black jerseys for a home game. So all this stuff happens in advance, but we really never had that from Kentucky. Well, they're doing that different now. They've given out all the themes, right? The jersey themes, the fan themes, what to wear, all of that. So we know all of that right now, but it's not just that. It's going on all these podcasts, all these national hits, and really just selling himself to the fan base and selling the program, selling Kentucky. And that's something that's been a little different. So I think we'll hear more of that, obviously, because this is the biggest stage to sell. None's more bigger from an off-season standpoint, and then going to Tampa at this big event that the SEC makes a spectacle. It is a spectacle. SEC Network's going to have 50 hours of television coverage next week, so it's a spectacle. There's going to be a lot of media members there, and I expect to see more of him selling it, and hopefully hear more about why that was so important. And then I also think like Jay Batt, I think his official start day is right after SEC Media Days in, but I think we'll hear talk about that relationship potentially, how important that is, and also say that might be final goodbyes to Mitch Barnhart. I think we you might just hear that come up, and it'll obviously be something we'll talk about. And I think a lot of people, like when people talk to me and Rouse, I think that's going to be something that comes up. Just what does that mean? What is that? Because Mitch Barnhart has been here for so long. This is the first SEC Media Days, I think, without Mitch Barnhart since what, 02, 01? That's like Phil Fulmer subpoena era. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Phil Fulmer subpoena SEC Media Days. So, like, it's been a long time. So, what does that look like? Especially for Stein, one guy hires you, another guy comes in. So, it'll be different. And next here, as we kind of segue, but before we do that, you got the Open going on right now. Baseball's about to start. Trade deadline's looming. Some people may be looking at World Series odds. World Cup. Is England a live dog? Do you think Harry Kane and the boys are going to do it? Well, make this season one for the history books. Make it legendary. BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, what are you waiting for? Now is the time. It's the time to do it. Use bonus code ON3 and you will get up to $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM, plus an offer for 50% off an annual membership to On3. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPNY or text HOPNY 467-369. New York. Call 1-800-NEXT STEP. Arizona. 1-800-327-5050. Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF. Iowa. 1-800-981-0023. Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days, in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. All righty. No, unfortunately, I don't think that you can get much action about SEC Media Days, but it won't be long. Season win totals next month. We'll be doing that yearly episode, giving our best win total. So that's coming around the corner. That'll be dropping down the chimney probably around mid-August. And we're going to get out again. Going to get out to Monticello Bank. Going to get out some other places in August, kind of preview the Cats football season. Exciting to do that. And previewing the Cats football season starts now. Position previews, Adam Luckett, myself, are going to be starting those on KentuckySportsRadio.com when we get back from SEC Media Days. And we're going to go through all the positions. But before we do that, we're going to be talking about these players in Tampa. So I figured now, as we kind of segue, now is a good time to just go over the roster, talk about the roster, where Kentucky is, and we're going to run through that quickly right now. We're going to do more of this previewing the roster as the season gets closer, obviously. But things take shape, position battles take over. But now it's just like a good, I think, 10,000-foot view of where the roster sits, specifically, now that we've got some roster news this week with Matt Ponatoski locked and loaded. On campus, Drew Franklin was the first to report. KentuckySportsRadio.com. KS Board got it first, so make sure you're checking out KS Board, obviously. But Ponatoski gives them a quarterback. And so we'll start with quarterback, right? Quarterback will come up. Kenny Minchie. Kentucky's all in on Kenny Minchie. As we've talked about, that's not going to change anytime soon. Expect to hear that in Tampa, but also like the backup battle, like just where they are with Callum Wither. The Canadian former Ohio quarterback is in. Matt Ponatoski is in. Marshall transfer, Ja'Kai Long, returnee Brennan Ward. Going to be an interesting battle. So QB room, Ponatoski is obviously the big development. We know Kentucky's all in on Minchie, but Ponatoski again. Big development. The guy I'm really high on. Just how does he factor in here? I think is something we'll be talking about these next few weeks. And then at running back, I think the big question is just health, availability. Just how healthy are C.J. Baxter and Javonte Barnes? What does Kentucky have there? I think looming is Martellus Carter. People have asked me, Adam, Martellus Carter Jr., is he going to stay at running back? I think we've had multiple mailbag questions on Martellus Carter. There'll be another Luckett's mailbag this Friday. So make sure you're checking that out at KSR Plus. But yeah, I think, do we get a health update on Baxter or Barnes this week? No, the next week in Tampa, we'll find out. But running back is an interesting position just because we don't know really just the health now. And then if they even are healthy, just how, C.J. Baxter, you feel like you've got a legit RB1 potentially if he's the 2023 C.J. Baxter, but we don't know. So that's going to be interesting. Wide receiver, again, do they have a wide receiver one? Don't know. What we do know is DJ Miller is going to be a big role in this offense. Going to have a big role in this offense as a sophomore. Nick Anderson, Shane Carr transfers. Nick Anderson, LSU transfer. Shane Carr, Southern Utah transfer, are expected to have a big role. Jacaden Ferguson, Arkansas transfer. Where does he fit? Harley Gilmore's on this roster, believe it or not. And then a guy like Kenny Darby is going to play. Like, he's going to have a role, the true freshman. And so wide receivers, when they come up, I think DJ Miller is the big name we're going to continue to hear. But you're also going to hear these other guys. I think that's a position, again, we've said it a lot in the Stoops era, and I think it's starting off Stein era. This wide receiver position's got a lot to prove. So interested to see how that plays out. Tight end, I think you're going to hear both in Tampa and in these next few weeks, tight end, position of strength, position. It is set to really help us out a lot and produce in this passing game. We all know Willie Rodriguez, but they've been really high on Henry Boyer. So get ready for that. And then Mikael Skinner is a big sleeper on this team. The redshirt freshman was Kentucky's highest ranked recruit in the 2025 high school class out of South Carolina. He's kind of that flex tight end move athlete that I think they can do some things with. He had a big catch early on in the spring game. He's going to be a guy I think is going to be featured. So tight end, when the tight end position comes up, I think you're going to hear that they expect it to be a position of strength this year, both in Tampa at media days and then both preseason fall camp. Offensive line, a big blue wall. Is it back? That's going to come up. Cutter Leftwich is going to be a guy like Cutter Leftwich. Obviously, he's, I'll turn 37 next week while in Tampa. Cutter Leftwich graduated high school a decade after I did. And so, obviously, this is a young guy who they've handed the keys to the offensive line room over to, but Leftwich seems to be a guy a lot of people are fans of. Think he has a really high ceiling as kind of this up and coming offensive line coach. So seeing what he does, they've given Leftwich real resources here this offseason, right? Go out and get Lance Hurd, who remember when Kentucky got Lance Hurd, that was a pretty big surprise. But one of the best tackles available this offseason. So they went out and got one of the best, and then they spent money to bring in Colton Price, one of the best centers available. They spent money to bring in Tegra Shabola, who ended up probably being one of the best guards available in the portal class, and then developing other guys after that. We've seen offensive line even in recruiting. Offensive line has made a splash in high school recruiting. We've seen them take some big swings. So Leftwich, I think, will be a guy that comes up this week. Just what does he bring to this offensive line? And then what do the transfers bring? Can the big blue wall be back? Again, when Stein has talked, he feels really confident about the offensive line and where they're at. So that's obviously a big question going into the season. They feel good, and I think you'll see them continue to sell that confidence here over these next few weeks. And that gets us really over the defense now. We're not going to hear from Jay Bateman, but we will hear from Stein, and we will hear from Ty Bryant. That'll be kind of who speaks on defense in Tampa, and then we'll see what the sell is at media day. Captain Crash, it's very nice. Luckett looks about like he's about to turn 27, not 37. Don't feel 27, but I do have a little bit of a baby face going on there. You are right. But the big 3-7, I don't even know who, you always 33 is the Larry Bird year, right? 23 is the Michael Jordan year. Who's 37? What's the 37 year? Who is 37? So if you got a good number 37, share them with me. The only 37 I can really remember of Kentucky is Jimmy Haley, tight end, couch era. He wore number 37, I believe. So I guess I'm going to be in my Jimmy Haley year. But if you got a good 37 for me, drop it in the chat as we kind of shift to the defense. Again, I want to emphasize over these next few weeks as we're in talking season, which the point of this episode was to kind of set the table for talking season, what we're going to be talking about here these next few weeks. I think with the defense schematically, just what does it look like? Aggressive. I think you're going to hear A&M brought up a lot. I think you're going to hear about what Jay Bateman did at Army, because he's got a lot of guys on the staff that he worked with at Army. The Nichols coach, James Foster, played for him at Army. Josh Christian Young, the safeties coach, worked with him at Army. There's a lot of guys. Alan Brown worked with him at Florida, not at Army, but worked with him at Florida. There's a lot of guys that have experience with Bateman, and there's going to be a blend, I think, of what his Army defenses were and then what Mike Elko did at A&M. Again, back to that third down pressure package, I think you're going to see a lot of it, and they're going to play more aggressive, Kentucky, than what we're used to defensively. So the standard on defense has changed a little bit, what they're kind of believing in and what they're going to hang their hat on. I think we'll kind of see that play out, and they'll I think, open up on that, just talking about how more aggressive they are, how much more man coverage they're going to play, all that. Defensive line, I think they believe the defensive line is in position to be a strength of the team. Gadsden obviously is a guy we've talked about. I think Jamarian Harkless, Purdue transfer, is like kind of that typical nose tackle space eater in the middle. It's Gather Han. Ahmad Bro, the LSU transfer, is going to be a guy I think is going to have a big role potentially as a pass rusher. And then I'm interested to just hear more about kind of what they feel about these edge guys. Sam Green, former USC transfer, is back, but he's coming off that ACL injury that happened in November last year. All right. So tread cautiously, as I would say. You know, they're saying Green's going to be back, and I expect him to play this year, but you know how ACL recoveries goes, and a lot of times you need a year just to knock off the rust before you reach what you were before then. So obviously it starts with Green, but they've got some rushers in here. We know Myquise Humphrey-Grace, as we mentioned before, but Gardner Webb transfer, Antonio Barry returning, Lorenzo Cowan, you know, CJ Works is in there as well after flashing as a freshman. They got some guys here. And then what can these guys bring to there we go. John Sipple. My high school number was 37 year. Yeah. Oh, there you go. This is your Meta World Peace year, Luckett. There you go. My Ron Artest year. Even though he was 18, like I feel like Ron Artest was all these different numbers. He was 37. I think he was 91 with the Pacers. Wasn't he on the Rockets? Didn't he have a different number with the Rockets? Yeah. So maybe the Meta World Peace year. So there you go. But back to the defensive line. Or edge, excuse me. I'm very intrigued just by this defensive front. I think they've got a strength in numbers thing going on here, but I also think they got two leaders potentially with Gadsden and Myquise Humphrey-Grace. I like some of the body types they have at the edge. I like how they counter or how they kind of balance each other out. They're not the same type of player. So cautiously optimistic about what they could become. And I don't think they're going to have a 10-sack guy, but I think they could have a lot of 5 to 7-sack guys. And you look up at the end of the year and you're like, wow, Kentucky's in the top 20 sack rate. Oh, wow. You want to CFBstats.com, you go to the SEC, you check out sacks. Oh, wow, Kentucky's third in the SEC in sacks. Gang 9. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. And so I think the pass rush is going to be sneaky this year, and I think you'll hear them express some confidence in it here moving forward. Linebacker is interesting. Grant Gottfried's kind of a known. After that, we'll see. Kentucky basically needed a starting linebacker and left the portal with Bo Barnes and Tavian Wallace, two guys with 3 years of eligibility left, but neither one started. I think Barnes is kind of going to be a plug-and-play starter for them. Was a big recruit in Texas. Guy Bateman knew of even back to high school. All indications in the spring was kind of started out slow, but he hit another gear at the end. So where is he at? Obviously, really linebacker is really riding on those two. We'll see where the depth is, but at linebacker, it's really Godfrey and Bo Barnes. And then I think Antoine Smith is kind of an interesting player from a rush standpoint because of his athletic profile. That Smith was a guy, Antoine Smith was a guy who was like a track star at Atlanta Westlake. Got really good athletic juice. So I think they're going to use him, but the linebacker today the next few weeks is really going to be about You need Grant Godfrey to be rock solid, and they're going to need Barnes to really come on. He's a really important player for Kentucky. And then the secondary, I want to start out with safety before we kind of wrap up here. Safety, we've talked about a lot, but it's really three guys. I'm going to include Aaron Gates here. Three guys that are really important to Kentucky. Ty Bryant, Jordan Castell, Aaron Gates. Those guys are going to be players I don't think Jay Bateman, and some of the other assistant coaches are going to want to take off the field. They're going to put a lot on these guys' plates, and they're going to need them to play well. Specifically, a big thing in this defense I think you're going to see is a lot of pre-snap confusion, pre-snap looks to roll into something different post-snap. And safeties have a lot to do with that. Showing one cover structure pre-snap and then rolling out, or even showing one thing and then blitzing. Safeties are going to be heavily involved in that, and making sure everyone's lined up where they're supposed to be, and where everyone's going post-snap where they're supposed to be, where everyone knows, like, I'm showing this, but I got to really play that. I'm showing this pre-snap, but I got to play this post-snap. I think safeties are going to be big in that, and they're going to put a lot on these safeties with Ty Bryant, Jordan Castell, who had a relationship with Jay Bateman at Florida. They're going to be important. And then Aaron Gates, of course, same as Castell, has a relationship with them. But nickel is a very important player in this defense. Very important. They're going to put a lot on those three guys. So expect that. And we're going to talk about the importance of these three players moving into the season. Depth at safety is a little interesting because you don't really know, right? Jaden Smith was a returning, I think, and plug in at nickel. Dylan Williams was a nice recruiting win for the old staff at safety. Still got 4 years eligibility left. Jesse Anderson was a guy they added from Pittsburgh. Hasn't really played, though. So where does he fall? So it's going to be interesting because depth, I think, is a pretty big question mark at safety. But they've got three guys I think they really believe in. And so how much do they believe in, and how important is it for those guys to stay safe or stay healthy, I think is critical. And then corner, I'm going to leave with corner. Corner was, I think, quarterback, offensive line, and probably receiver were probably the three biggest positions people were kind of, I would say, hyper-focused on when the new staff got here. I think offensive line, it's just what we do every portal season here in the Kentucky sphere, is because that just got to rebuild on the offensive line, and that's just been the case of the portal. Then quarterback, obviously, because of Stein, it was like, what are they going to do at quarterback? And then, okay, now they need a quarterback. How are they going to attack it? So obviously quarterback, and then receiver. I think DeAndre Moore was like one of the big targets from the jump. So obviously that was, and then the feed the studs thing came into that. Or are they going to pay for this big receiver? And so that was one they followed. But an underrated one was corner. And I think a lot of people, specifically my friends over at KS Board, were very, very worried about corner. Corner was a disaster for Kentucky last year. It just was. At Kentucky Media Day last year, both Mark Stoops and Brad White thought it was going to be a position of strength, and ended up being arguably their biggest weakness on the football team. You could argue. Corner they were decimated by injury, and even when they weren't, they just didn't play really well at corner really all year last year. So where are they at? And specifically going to a scheme where Kentucky was from a scheme where I think they tried to protect the corners, where there's not going to be much protection for the corners moving forward. They have gushed about Tyron Nichols. Tyron Nichols was a big recruiting win for Kentucky. They've gushed about him, but he's had a hard time staying healthy. So Tyron Nichols is a guy that'll be talked about a lot. Hassan Sykes was a guy they targeted early, a Western Carolina transfer. Those are their top two, but DeMarcus Gardner has been a player that has come up a lot in conversations. And Nasir Addison was a guy who entered the portal that Kentucky got out of the portal, who's played sparingly throughout the last few seasons. He even took a red shirt last year. He played in 4 games and they preserved his red shirt, which they really didn't need to do now in hindsight because of the new 5-for-5 rule, but you live and you learn on some of that stuff. And then Grant Grayton played a lot as a freshman last year. And then Andre Clark was a late add to the recruiting class that Bateman got, former Michigan signee, I believe it was a signee. Anyway, the Sharon Moore stuff happens. He gets out of that commitment or signing situation, whenever it was, lands at Kentucky. Clark has a reputation for being one of the better cover corners in this class, so he's going to be a guy that we talk about when that position comes up. Kevis Thomas is another returning as I kind of look at the list. So just where does corner shake out and how does Kentucky truly feel about that? They said all the right things. Bateman said he told us when I asked him in spring, he said it was one of the positions I was worried about really starting it, but I feel better after just a few practices. Just seeing what they saw from Nichols. Obviously, Sykes was the guy they liked, and they gussed about Gardner really all spring. So that's going to be a position we talk about because it's an important position. Just because these guys are going to be out on islands more. And so we'll hear that talked about more. And then special teams. I'm not sure how much this will come up, but Kentucky's got their kicker back. Punter, it's going to be probably Murray State transfer, Tom O'Hara. So that's probably not going to come out a ton until we get closer to the season. But that kind of wraps us up. We're in talking season now, right? We're in talking season. Our goal here was to set the stage for Tampa, set the stage really for August when we get into position preview, we get into Kentucky Media Day, to just kind of get you you all knew this, but it's just kind of, I wanted to refresh your memory here this week on 11 Personnel, and that's what we did, just running through the roster. Again, we're going to get more in-depth breakdowns of the roster and where things stand. We're going to go more into kind of the minutia when we're in Tampa, when we hear from Stein. But I think, again, what we're going to hear is his state of the program, where he's going to go into fanhood, feed the studs, introducing his staff, setting expectations, what he wants his vision to be, going over what they did in the transfer portal, how recruiting is going, marketing the program, and all of that good stuff. Is something that we're gonna hear about this week. And again, this week in all 11 personnel, Zen AI is one of our new sponsors. You can launch your own sportscast this summer with Zen AI, which is pioneering vibecasting, a new category where human conversation is front and center of vibecast as a conversation. Zen AI turns it into something worth sharing. Let Zen AI be your content producer. Learn more about vibecasting with Zen AI today. And again, Luckett's Mailbag Friday. Get the KS board. Drop me some questions. We got some questions rolling in here today that I'll answer a few of them before we get out of here. So if you want any of them, shoot them my way. Let's see here. Patrick Yankee ask, are you still in Morgantown at the regional Luckett? Have you made it home? I am at home. That was a long time in Morgantown. I don't know if you've ever spent 5 days in Morgantown, but I like my time in Morgantown. I wouldn't advise spending 5 days in Morgantown. And there's some good people in Morgantown. Let's rolling through the chat here. Some people talking about Argentina or England. Don't ask me. Don't really know. John enjoyed his interview with Kublik. Again, I would highly recommend going back and watching that interview with Kublik. While the offense should be more dynamic, I think there's a good chance that a 3,000-yard passer drought continues based on how we'll probably need to play in year one. Going to have to keep the D fresh. This is interesting from Artisanal Gumbo, because Stein did talk about like playing at like a methodical pace in that interview with Kublik, how all the numbers of plays are going down, and how he didn't say this is just my opinion. Defenses are kind of ahead right now, in my opinion, because they figured out how to kind of match up body for body type, I think, against these spread RPO attacks. And they've also, I think defenses also realized the importance of not giving up explosives, but they've also realized, hey, third down, we've got to take our swings and pressure. And I think all that is kind of added up to, we're seeing just numbers offensively are not as explosive as they used to be, I think, both in the NFL and in college ball. So they've kind of adjusted that. Stein kind of talked about that. My concern with that would be, where's this running back situation? And you're not really going to have much of a QB run element if you're Kentucky. Where's the running back room? Do they have a running back attack where they can consistently feel like they can churn out 150, 175 yards in these 10 power conference games? We'll see. Where I think passing game wise, they could maybe turn to Minchie more, where I think they could get specifically if they play that bowl game. I think they're going to have probably in that 3,000 yard drought. Captain Crash, you're a brave man. I like to spend 6 days in Morgantown. Patrick Yankee again. Do we see any playing time for Brock Kaufman this year? I think he's in the mix. We'll see. I think he's competing for a spot. We'll see. But I don't know how deep that wide receiver rotation is going to go, specifically when you start looking at how heavily the tight ends are going to be involved. So we'll see. Looking forward to talking to my guys at the SEC podcast this week, John KY Blue. They ranked our DBs the best. I wouldn't be there, but like I get why people might do that when you just start looking at playing experience and raw stats and some things of that nature. Like they'll stand out more because you're basically looking at Ty Bryant, and Jordan Castile, really, from there. But that will do it for this week's version of 11 Personnel. Again, everybody, Tampa will get there Sunday night. Monday after we finish with Stein, 11 Personnel, we'll be live right here. Then we'll talk Tuesday, Wednesday, in between. We'll have all kinds of YouTube content, all kinds of written content. It's going to be a good time. Follow along. We'll have a behind-the-scenes thread up at KS Board. Make sure you're at KSR Plus now and throughout the week. Luckett's Ballot, Order of Finish. My preseason All-SEC teams will be dropping. We got an early scouting report series rolling right now as we're previewing teams. Justin is dropping great content. Jeff Drummond as well. It's going to be a fun few days. Glad to have talking season back. Let's get it on.